to the cloud. So today we're going to go over the 12 to 18-year-old range. We'll talk about cognition, what's going on in their lives, we're going to relate it all to games, of course, as usual. And the reason we're doing this once again is because in the world of UX, user experience, we constantly get asked questions about what are the different age ranges looking for, what game should we, what demographic or age range should our game be tested on, what type of research questions are we going to ask. We get it all in UX. UX, user experience, is one of those groups that when it comes to testing a product, everybody wants to talk to us, whether it's design, publishing, marketing, business intelligence for gaming companies. So often is the case that when I do a research experiment, I get 3 meetings before the study's done, and I get 5 meetings after the study is done. And the 3 meetings before the study are related to, okay, what types of research questions should we ask, given who we're testing, et cetera. And it never ends. And so what I started doing was with AAA gaming companies is, as like an advanced technique in user experience, I would actually give them these presentations before we'd even start testing, so we could put us all on the same page about what different age groups are looking for in games, and therefore, how we should all approach the testing, given that everybody has different responsibilities in gaming companies and different interests. So it's quite fun. This is one of the trickier ones, is the 12 to 18 age range. Mostly because I think this is where the marketing really starts, and then the money really starts as well, pouring in, because you can get some severe addiction, obviously, from children playing games between 12 and 18. And some of the companies I've worked with or consulted with have specifically targeted some of these things we're going to talk about today. Even before I gave the lecture, they have good business intelligence as well, and they know what they need to do. So we'll talk about several things today, including puberty and sexual interest and sex and hypersexualization of characters. This is where it starts. It starts here. And there's a lot of gaming companies that specifically target this. And I get asked questions sometimes where I have to it's really challenging to answer the question ethically, because the way it's phrased from the gaming company, which is, we know this is wrong, but should we still target gamers for these things? And I'm like, look, yes, their brain is changing drastically, and there are certain things they're interested in. Their hormones are changing, their body's changing, but you have to be careful, right? Because you can alienate your audience as well. We'll talk about how they're shifting, how their peer groups and social groups are shifting slightly as well. And then, we'll spend a lot of time today talking about transitions and, of course, things about physical maturation that are important to this particular group. So one of the things that I've been interested in for a long time is how gaming companies are actually using hypersexualization and sexualization to specifically target this age range. And I've been asked questions many times about, can we measure the satisfaction of the art in the game compared to other art that we're creating? So like A/B testing art. And I get asked it so often that I decided to really focus on this in my developmental lecture to gaming companies, to sort of bring it full circle and discuss, okay, why are there so many questions on sexualization and hypersexualization, specifically for this age range? And why are some companies specifically focusing on, building games around what we call teen music stars, and then sort of, finding like a popular person who sings, country music or hip hop or whatever else, and then building a game around it that has, very hypersexualized art, and specifically targeting like 12 and 13-year-old girls. So the reason is puberty. And if we look at what this particular age range is very interested in, and you probably remember back to middle school people, teachers, I think, hate middle school the most. And parents are always worried about middle school for reasons, because there's a lot of changes going on in kids in middle school. And so one of the data points we always look at is that there's just massive physical changes going on in these children, both in the brain and in the physical body as well. And that leads to increased interest in stimuli that match those changes as well. Hence, you get this influx of games that are specifically targeting this category. So where it impacts us in UX is art. Not only do we test, whether or not a game is works correctly, but we also test whether or not the way it's presented is more or less interesting to these different audiences, and from all age ranges, from 6 to 12, 12 to 18, 18 to 24, 24 to 32, and beyond. And one of the things that we have seen on our testing is, all things being equal, the average 12 to 18-year-old is much more interested in hypersexualized art than they are in non-hypersexualized art. And I mean the type of art that folks in the gaming industry sort of rail against and say, hey, this shouldn't be in games, it's not the correct art, etc. So, but not all gaming companies sort of follow those rules. And I know specifically, with my family, with my wife, there are certain games that we just don't allow our kids to play, because it especially with our oldest son, who's 11 years old, because that is something that he's starting to show interest in. And obviously, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference between boys and girls in development and things of that nature, but it tends to be a little bit more aggressively targeted towards female gamers, girl gamers, than male gamers when it comes to hypersexualization. And it's just something I can't not talk about at 12 to 18. I have to be real with game companies, because this is a big part of developmental psychology, is 12 to 18 is this increased interest in sex and in hypersexualization and things that look sexy and things of that nature. And I'm always a little worried, and you can see where my ethical boundaries sort of, I get a little bit worried sometimes, because sometimes there'll be a publisher in a gaming conversation that I'm having when I'm covering developmental psychology as it relates to age cohorts and testing, and they really pick up on this, and I think they actually are like, well, yeah, this is a really good way to target children. And I'm like, that's not the point here. The point here is that they're very interested in this, and we have to be careful, versus showing that this can actually be one of the ways that you can reach in and target these individuals. I've got a lot of friends who have gone to work for billion-dollar companies, most of them in California, where they specifically make games targeting 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old girls. And the games are all about microtransactions and looks, and things that would be of interest to those girls. And why do you think gaming companies in general tend to target young females versus young boys? Any particular reasons why?
I feel like nowadays young women might be more self-conscious and more likely to buy into this kind of mentality.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. Yeah, the research shows that young girls tend to have more pressure on them in terms of like societal's norms towards looks, for sure. What's another reason why they would target 11, 12, 13, and 14-year-old girls over the same cohort of boys?
Aren't the majority of younger gamers guys, or no?
Yeah, it's about split 50-50. It's just they, marketing tends to target boys for certain games and girls for certain games as well. But one of the biggest reasons why is the delay in maturity and sexual maturity for boys in that same age cohort. There tends to be a delay in boys. And so on average, the typical boy is behind the typical neurotypical female in terms of this maturity. And that's why, for instance, my son's 11 and he plays soccer. And when he plays the same age group girls in soccer, they are often 4 to 6 inches taller than the boys and heavier than the boys as well. And in some cases, I mean, he's terrified. He's like, I'm going to get eaten alive by these girls, right? Because they're bigger, they're taller, they're faster, they're stronger. But that's all going to change once they hit 13 or 14. You're going to have this shift where now the boys are going through this massive growth spurt. So companies know this, and they're very interested in this as well. One of the things that is interesting too is if you look at the data on dating and sexual relationships in this age cohort, it tends to reinforce this really big focus on sex in this particular age cohort. And I'm not going to lie, I think the gaming industry has an issue with hypersexualization. There's some targeting going on, and they know what they're doing. And once again, the data shows, all things being equal, if someone between the 12 of 18 has to pick between two different art assets, and one of them is benign and relatively non-sexualized, and the other one's sexualized, they're going to go for the sexualized one. They're going to go for the one that in theory looks cool or hot or whatever else. And we've seen that in data sets that we've collected over the years. And when you look at and it's hard to put ourselves back in the mindset of middle schoolers. I mean, it's been a while for most of us. But if you can kind of go back as an anthropologist and sort of study and observe what happens in middle school, or talk to middle school teachers or other individuals, you'll see that it's a little bit of a different world there. Alyssa, did you have a question?
Oh, no, sorry. My wrist was stuck. I was snapping it back.
No problem. So one of the things that I'm always interested in is looking at data and statistics when it comes to relationships and things of that nature, and where does the interest really start occurring. So the other thing too is looking at dating and games and things of that nature. And I will often ask the classes, because it really, to me, there's been a MMO revolution, and I think it's starting to come back. There's a bunch of MMOs getting ready to release in the next 2 years that I think a lot of people are going to try out, outside of World of Warcraft or the other one or two big name MMOs that are out there right now. But if you can put yourself back in middle school or high school and you look at dating, did any of you ever see any dating in games as well, where there was actually relationships in the game? Now I'm 45, and so if I go back 20 years ago to Star Wars Galaxies, I would be in my early 20s. And I can remember there were stories of people getting married in the game. Their characters getting married first, and World of Warcraft had this too. That's a little bit later. I was in my mid-20s by the time that came out. But essentially, people were using the gaming universe as sort of a dating platform in some cases. But I was already out of my teen years and my middle school years before those MMOs ever existed. So, and I haven't seen any data collected on this, and I think the gaming companies kind of have a vested interest in not collecting this data, because it would worry a lot of parents to look at how this particular cohort is using their digital tools for different means. But one of the things that's interesting is there's some data that was collected, and the same authors that, I kind of adapted this lecture from a series of lectures in developmental psychology, different authors. But in general, the majority of the authors say a few things about the statistics that kind of shocked me a little bit about high school students. What percentage of high school students, and this was like 10 or 15 American high schools that were surveyed. And of course, people self-select into the survey. The question is by the time these children get to their senior year in the United States, and this was 2017, what percentage of them have had sexual relationships with other kids in school? And I was not ready for the answer on this, mostly because I think I was a little bit sheltered and went to a weird high school, and I had sort of overbearing parents as well. So, and I didn't date in high school. I was sort of interested in sports and education and things of that nature. But you think is 40, 50, 60, or 70% of high schoolers by the time they're in their senior year?
60, 70.
Yeah, it's always, the data says it's somewhere between 60 and 70% of high schoolers. And when you think about it, their brains are not very large, right? They're growing their brains. They're in, especially early on in this age range that we're talking about, from 12 to 18. We talked about that in the previous 6 to 12 range, is they're going through this massive neural growth, but at the same time, they're going through massive hormonal growth. It's the perfect reason why we don't let these kids drive, right? Because they make dumb decisions and they don't think these decisions through. So it ends up being this very difficult area of life. And so when I look at how developmental comes in and impacts games, I'm always curious as to how many gaming companies kind of, they know this, right? They have great researchers. Publishers are the most in tune group with our participants in UX out of anybody in a gaming company, because they're all about making sure that the game matches what the player expects. And so they know this stuff. And it's always fun having a discussion with a publisher about this particular topic for 12 to 18, because they have a lot of really pointed questions. They want to know the difference between boys and girls, and they want to have peer-reviewed research and things of that nature. And they're always looking for data from gaming companies as well to show like interest in purchasing, especially with like sexualized things or things that make you look prettier or hotter or cooler or bigger or faster. So it's quite interesting. One more slide, 2 more slides on this particular topic, and then we'll transition to neural development. But there's a lot of things that sort of impact this increased interest in sex and this increased interest in hypersexualized objects. So not everybody's going to be the same. And it's one of the things that I often will kind of go over, because the publishers will ask me, like, how are people different? And why are there any differences across the country? And are there any differences in these different pillars or these things that are important to this particular group that we should know about that might decrease or increase engagement in a digital product or in products in general? And so I'll say, yeah, so if you look at like ultimate interest in sex and between 12 to 18 and a kid having a sexual relationship, right? Versus interest in like sports or something else, or like parents keeping them overly involved in other aspects of life. All of these components are those ingredients. So, like for instance, if you're specifically building a Major League Baseball game targeted towards 12, 13, 14-year-olds, it's very likely you don't have to have a lot of hypersexualized content. It probably wouldn't hurt in terms of increasing enjoyment, but it's not one of those things that a publisher is usually going to pick up on. And the reason is you look at all these components, and some of them can become big influences on a person's life. So for instance, I'll hear from a lot of parents that say, I want to keep my kids over involved. And what that does is that it will limit some of these components, like things that might increase interest in things that the parents don't want, sort of from taking over. So if you look at parents, religion, school, and friends, right? Those are components that are all either variables that can increase, decrease, or not really do anything to that ultimate interest in these sexual relationships that the kids are looking for. And then the internalized, the blue ones are sort of these, what's already present in the kid's head. So if you have internalized norms and attitudes that, for instance, like sports is the ultimate thing in the world, then that is going to influence the child to spend their energy on certain things. And so, I've had given this lecture to sports companies, and I'm like, look, it's like you have to know your group and what is influencing that group. And I hate to say it, but obviously, if the biggest impact of hypersexualized content on 12 to 18-year-olds is probably going to be that cohort that the parents aren't really there, right? The video games are the babysitter. Video games are the hobby. And it's sort of like that's easy pickings for these gaming companies. But also from the perspective of like a sports company, they probably don't have to have that content in there for that particular cohort, because that cohort sort of is going to have that delayed interest in these areas. Yes, sure, there's interest and there's maturity and things of that nature, but it's going to be slightly delayed. So I'd like to open it up for comments on just in general, because hypersexualization and sexualization of game content is a huge topic in gaming right now. Do any of you have any opinions on this topic or thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's really prevalent in, I would say, the MMO scene, um, especially ones that are like, because a lot of MMOs are, it's not very popular in the North America right now, but they're also popular in Japan, where this gets even worse, in my opinion. Um, what's it
Yeah.
called? Yeah. It's essentially like the biggest problem that I see with it is it's always it's also one-sided, generally, towards females.
Yeah, there's two parts of this. It's interesting. It's hypersexualization of female characters to attract men, but it's also body shape. And we talked a little bit about that in last lecture, 6 to 12s, but it's sort of using that like perfect hip to waist ratio to drive interest in character selection. And I actually brought this up with my wife. We were playing Pokemon Go, and I was like, "Have you ever stopped and looked at the female character in Pokemon Go?" I was like, this is hypersexualized. Like it's the perfect hip to waist ratio. If I go to like any of my design books, I'm like, why is that? And why are they always wearing like skin tight leotards, right? Where's the clothing that actually covers the body and things of that nature? And I we had an interesting conversation about it. I'm like, it's not overtly hypersexualized. It's kind of covertly. You wouldn't notice it unless you actually noticed it. But obviously that game is extremely popular in Japan. So, and the United States as well.
I would argue in MMOs it's almost overtly at some points where like
Yeah.
just like the armor design is like just like even in like I think Terra is one of the ones that is probably the worst offenders, where like the male version of the armor will cover up the entire body, but the female version will cover up like maybe a tenth of that.
Yeah. Jeremy, what I tell publishing and BI and marketing, because I'm trying to influence them in a positive direction, I say, like, at our age, we're all old in here. Sorry to break it to all of you, but your brains and your body are now on the downward run, right? Like you're not growing anymore in terms of neural growth, you're losing neurons and you're sort of slowing down. Your peak years were 12 to 18 for growth, both puberty, neurally, etc. The problem is, though, is you have this massive puberty explosion, but your brain is behind and it's catching up. It's lagging behind that. And then you have this massive emotional explosion as well. So we can sit around here and have this conversation and all be Vulcans about it and have a discussion. Oh, I'm offended, and blah, 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 and whatever else. But 12 to 18-year-olds can't have that conversation. They're not, especially a little bit younger, like 12 to 16, they're not cognitively ready for it. They don't have, on average, right? Most of them don't have the resources, but they do have a lot of puberty going for them. So I typically, I'll tell gaming companies, I'm like, look, yes, there is choice and people cannot be influenced by certain things. And you can go too far with this. But the biggest sort of casualty of this war is going to be probably as young as 9 for girls, all the way to 14, 15, 16, and as young as like 10 or 11 for boys, all the way to 15, 16, 17, because that's where they just can't handle it, right? And their brains aren't functioning like our brains are functioning. Does that make sense, Jeremy?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So when I talk about this as a pillar, I usually tell people like, you might want to express caution if you're going to circulate this in a gaming company. And once again, this comes from developmental psychology. Most of the time I give this lecture to gaming companies, they're like, yeah, I remember, that makes sense. That I've seen that in Scientific American and different things in that nature. But when I apply, when you cover it here and you specifically have a conversation about it, they're like, yeah, we really need to think about that. It's like it's not as big as an impact in terms of producing deviant behavior if you have the same stimuli just for 30-year-olds. But the problem with games is there's no restriction on age. The games have all the way, pretty much every game has their 6 and 7-year-olds playing it, all the way up to 50, 60, 70, 80-year-olds playing that game. It's kind of open access in a way, even though there are these ESRB ratings. I don't think most parents think about that stuff when they just double click to let their kid play the game, unless there's like overt violence and things of that nature.
I think Super Smash Brothers. I think it was when was it Terry that got released? It was like one of the DLC characters. They like specifically mentioned that they weren't adding a certain character from the same game genre because they didn't want to sexualize her because she's known to be sexualized. I forgot who it was. I think it was
it was one of the characters from is it Fatal Fury, right? That's where Terry's
maybe
from.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
What I'll often tell BI in marketing is I'll say, go to your store and categorize, have your artists do a Likert scale on the hypersexualized or sexualized nature of your characters. Then look at age, and then also look at sex, gender, and start coding purchasing and interest, hovering over objects, looking like increase interest. And it's like the data will speak for itself. You'll see clear trends and patterns in the data. And I think, when companies sometimes sort of, correct themselves, usually from complaints, it's not driven by data. It's like someone has now complained and draw their attention to it. But I think we collectively will see a lot more focus on this in the next 5 to 6 years. And so when I talk about this pillar with gaming companies, I try to do it educationally, and I'm very careful about publishers sort of using this stuff and refocusing their energy on this stuff in a bad way to drive profit. So it's a challenge though, right? Because companies need to make profit, but not on every aspect of what we cover in these developmental lectures. All right, shall we shift gears?
Sure.
Let's shift gears. Let's talk about performance and competition and brain power. I mentioned in the last class that, I also coach soccer and I'm a sports psychologist. I'm actually a member of a organization called the Association for Applied Sports Psychology, a professional member. I'm just getting ready to get my license in it. And one of the things I find most fascinating is competition and performance and engagement, both in the real sports world and in the esports world, and also in the video game world as well. And I was very interested in established sports groups that have been developing children in sports for, 50, 60 years, and have really turned it into a science. And so I started going to Spain for a sports soccer school, and learning about how they actually teach young kids about sports. And one of the things there's something called goal setting theory. And one of the things that ruins kids' sports, youth sports, and you all are probably going to be fathers and mothers and have kids at some point in your life. And you're going to be standing on a sports sideline and you're going to hear someone say, kick the ball, win, score a goal, like win. And then, at the end of the game, the first question that comes out of parents' mouths is, did you win? It's not how well did you play. It oftentimes is, did you win the game? And so there's this focus on winning. And I love this, and that's okay. It's okay to have this little bit of this focus on winning throughout sports. But it's actually one of those things that can drive young children out of video games before they actually get to the point where they're capable of influencing a victory or winning or having a direct contribution to winning. And what Barcelona would do with their youth academies, I mentioned this in last class, and so we talk more about it here, is they don't really allow the kids to focus on score or wins and losses until they're 12 and 13 years old. And the reason they do that is for two reasons. There's this massive physical growth spurt that occurs, and I'm starting to see it right now at 11, 12, and 13. So with my kids right now, my kids are in golf and soccer and whatever else. In sports equipment, I don't even want to buy this stuff anymore because they grow out of it immediately. So their bodies are just booming, right? And so it's like, I just bought a set of golf clubs 6 months ago. I have to buy another set for my 11-year-old. And I asked the person at the golf store the other day, I was like, can I just skip a size? Because he's growing so fast. So there's this rapid physical growth, but then there's this neural explosion that occurs at 12 to 13 as well, where the kids start to get it and they can start to compete and they can start to influence wins. And also cognitively, they can start to understand a loss as well and balance out a win and a loss and understand why they lost. So one of the things that I find very fascinating is like, we want to keep our gamers and we want them to all have fun in games, but a lot of these games are very competitive. How as a gaming company do we balance out mixing 12, 13, and 14-year-olds with 7, 8, 9, and 10-year-olds in the same gaming universe of competition, but not have those younger kids be completely demoralized because they can't get kills, they can't do anything, they can't actually influence what we call the achievement goal. And it's interesting because if you look at what Barcelona does, they simply don't let them play together. They keep the young kids with the young kids, they keep the old kids with the old kids. At a certain age, you can play up an age group at 6, 7, 8, and 9. But once they get to that magic age where that rapid physical growth and neural growth goes, they start to say, yeah, we need you to play your own age group for a couple of reasons. We don't want you to get hurt because there's such a huge difference between 11 and a 12-year-old. They're going to be 20 pounds difference at that age. And they're eating everything in your house. So get prepared for that, right? This massive shift in eating. But when I look at this particular slide, I see intense production of neurons, periods of sculpting and pruning of those neurons where they're just shifting around and reorganizing. And then the gray matter just booms in the head. And the gray matter is hugely important because we know through brain scans that reductions in gray matter or delays in gray matter development around the cortex of the brain are correlated with things like ADHD, inability to actually pay attention to things. And so that stuff is extremely important for focused attention. And focused attention is critical for esports competition and for gaming. So one of the things that I'll get asked often is, we're building a competitive game. Who should we test with? And they're like, well, let's test with 18-year-olds. I'm like, hold on. I'm like, if you look at League of Legends professional teams and professional esports teams, they often go as young as 13 or 14 years old. And some of them are in their prime at 16 and 17. That's when they do their best work in these games for a variety of reasons. But what are your thoughts on this, folks? Do you remember, or do you have young kids who just get slaughtered by older siblings? And do you see any of this, what I just talked about, in your gaming world right now? Most of you don't have kids, so I imagine not.
Only thing I can remember is like when I was a bit younger, I'd go back to my hometown and play like Call of Duty against both my cousins, and one of my cousins was more like 10, 11, probably like 9, and then my other cousin was like 13, 14, and we'd destroy the younger cousin. He'd get mad and leave.
Yeah,
stuff like that.
That's a classic example right there. So here's what you can do. Here's what you can pretty much bank on. Achievement goals. Achievement goals are like wins and losses, kills, like getting a certain number of kills, etc. You could almost say those are sort of performance goals as well. Once kids hit 12, 13 years old, they're very interested in that. And the reason they're interested in it is because they can control it. If you can control your environment, you feel power over your environment. And then you're interested in those things. the reasons that younger children, 8, 9, and 10, in the game that you played, are not interested in that is because they can't control. They can't do well. They don't have the skills or the brain power to achieve success there. And this is the average kid. There are obviously always some super kids out there. So therefore, the average kid actually sort of rejects this. But if we're going to focus on esports and we want competition and we want to have teams and we want to really focus on scores and wins and losses, this is the age range where you're going to start with. You're not going to go younger than 12. If you're younger than 12, you need to not focus on wins and losses, kill counts, and things of that nature. But at 12, you can do it because of this formal operations and brain development. And these are all the things that you see that cognitive psychologists start to measure, and they see massive growth in this age range. And you can think about it here. All of these things are related to gaming and performance and achievement and doing well in a game. Manipulating more than 2 categories of variables simultaneously, health and ammo, and presence on the map. I mean, that's easy for us to do in theory if we're playing first-person shooters. It's almost impossible for a young child to do that, to worry about their health, their ammo count, and where they are on the map. Changes that come with time. So that's the development of like, hey, there's an end game coming up. Am I properly equipped for the end game? I've been having fun, but I've got to actually increase and level up and get up to a point where I actually compete at the end of the product. Very challenging for a younger child, 7, 8, and 9, to keep that in mind that, oh yeah, there's this time thing and I've got to get to a certain point. Very easy for a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old to recognize that and key in on that. Even my 11-year-old understands that in Rocket League when he plays the tournaments. He's like, he'll win in the first round of a Rocket League tournament, and then he'll know he didn't play well, and he knows he has to get his game face on for the second round because it's going to be tougher competition. And then he knows even if he wins in that second round, if he did something wrong, he's got to mentally prepare to do better in the third round. And I hear him talking with his other 11-year-old friends about this, like, hey, we won the game, but we messed up. And so we've got to improve. And, you know, when I watch my 7-year-old play, there's none of that. It's more of along the lines of like, I need to pick a cooler car for the next round. That what car wasn't cool enough, even though they won. It's like different. It's just different focuses.
He's got a good point, though.
He does have a good point, yeah. Hypothesize a logical sequence of events, and you all know what that is. It's like, if they do this, it's like planning. If they're going to do this, then we should do that, and if, you know, strategies and things of that nature. Foresee consequences of your actions. That's the impulsiveness of our youth, right? When we're 6 to 12, we don't foresee the consequences. We just act. Whereas once you get older, you're like, and I saw it with Rocket League with my son. He's like, oh, no one's in goal. So if I go up and there's no goalies back there, they could get a cheap goal. And I don't want any cheap goals. So someone's got to drop back. And he's playing with his buddy, but then they have a third person pubbing with them. And that person who's pubbing is not communicating. So now I can see him foreseeing consequences much clearer than what an 8 or a 9-year-old would do. There's just that neural growth that allows that to occur. Logical consistency or inconsistency. It's interesting because he'll when you know, I'll give another Rocket League example. At character select or team select, it gives you like the ratings of all the players. He'll look at the rating of the person and try to research them a little bit and try to understand their level of their expertise to predict their behaviors. And be like, yeah, I think they're going to play this way. And then he'll watch their first like 1 minute of play. And then he'll get this sort of like understanding of how they're going to play in the future, which is really tells me he's spending way too much time on that game. If he spent nearly as much time in Rocket League in a real world sport, he'd be a professional athlete in that real world sport, the way that he focuses on Rocket League. Think in relativistic ways about self, others, and the world. That's basically just knowing who you are, where you're at in terms of your own skill sets, and understanding what you can and can't do, and where other people are at, etc. So it's like putting yourself in the big picture. And so all of those things start to pop in as early as 11, usually 10, 11, and then they're starting to really get refined at 12 and 13, and they're focused on, which brings our gamers into a totally different category of what they can do in our products versus previously. And previously, it's all about building and exploration and building skill sets, the foundations of this age group range. And you can have these two cohorts play together, but you have to be very careful. You have to, if you look at the age ranges playing a game like Fortnite, you have both of these cohorts present. But the way Fortnite de-emphasizes achievement and performance goals and gives people a lot of other goals that you can attain is brilliantly done. So Rocket League doesn't do that well because there's always a winner or a loss in a sports game at the end, and there's always a winner or a loss in Rocket League. So it actually emphasizes achievement goals, which with younger children is going to, push them out of the product as they keep losing over and over and over again. Any comments here on this? This is kind of one of those no-brainers. It's definitely a pillar all until it to itself for this age range. And I basically sum it up as like, hey, look, if you're going to have competition, go as young as 13. That's your audience. And as old, probably as 26, 27, 28. But you're really going to get a lot of competitive gamers in these teen years because they're capable of doing it. Factors that promote formal operational thought. This is an interesting one. It's essentially being involved in a lot of activities. I read I don't know if you all follow like famous athletes, but most incredibly famous athletes like Michael Jordan, Cruyff for soccer, they were 2-sport athletes or 3-sport athletes. They actually played many things. And the idea is that the more you practice body-brain interaction in different areas of sport, the more you can master a particular area of sport. And I've heard this from many folks, including Jordan talked about this for basketball. Cruyff talked about this for soccer, Dutch soccer. And then his educational system influenced Barcelona and other soccer clubs. And so it's interesting when you look at that, it's like there's probably something to that the more heterogeneous your peer group is or your activities are, the more you can understand the world and the capabilities of what you can do in the world. But one of the things that's interesting is that the research also shows that high school 12 to 18-year-olds get over involved in activities. They tend to do too much, and that can be a problem. And I'll often tell that to marketing companies. Like we've done some studies where we've interviewed high school kids about gameplay behaviors, and we found that like some of these kids will play 10 games a week, 10 different games, 1 to 2 hours each. And it's quite a bit of variety, but it shows that brand loyalty isn't as high as they would like to think they are, the publishing folks. And then these individuals are going to be experiencing a lot of different activities. And you'll see the same thing in like high school curriculums. It's like a lot of kids will want to be a part of 3, 4, 5, or 6 different groups. And I think I talked about those with you previously. I don't know if I mentioned it with this particular class, but when we look at participation in social groups and how that transitions to social systems and games, the social systems and games are entirely inadequate for how 12 to 18-year-olds actually traverse their social world. So in other words, social systems and games largely consist of join a guild and you have a chat system. Some games are actually changing that. I recognize that, but most games are still guild and chat system only. Anyways, this is basically saying that how do you really get your brain working the correct way? You do a lot of different things. How do you get in trouble? By doing a lot of different things. And that it's challenging for 12 to 18-year-olds in that respect. So I'll skip this slide here and I'll jump forward to emotional development. So emotional development is a challenging one. I'll talk about this as a pillar, right? This is our League of Legends players, the people who are going to get banned. The inability to control your emotions is going to be quite high with this particular audience group. So I'll have game companies talk about, yeah, our game is going to be for everyone down to like 12, 13 years old and up to 60. And I'll say, okay, well, what do you have in place to sort of make your audience play nicely with others and control the portion of the audience and cause people to want to quit your game, and control behaviors in your forums and also in your chat system and in your guilds? Because this particular group has a severe problem with controlling their emotions. And so you get that, increased emotional complexity. That simply means you can experience a lot of different emotions. So rage and hate and things of that nature, with a lot of power to that rage and hate. And there's the interdependence of cognition and emotion basically means there's a control system for emotion. The more cognitively aware you are, the more likely you can control those emotions. And there's a lag here with this particular group where the ability to experience emotions is here and the ability to control emotions is behind it here. And they need to be even in order to kind of be balanced. And that doesn't occur until you're almost 18, 19 years old. So essentially what we want to have is you want to have the ability to empathize with others. And certainly when you get to 11 or 12, you can start to, you get a sense of empathy, understanding how others are doing, which is really good when you play team games, because you need to understand how your actions are impacting the other teammates. You need to start to understand your own emotions and controlling your emotions. That is a big one. I played competitive esports, and one of the things I noticed was as individuals who were really good but had a hard time controlling their emotions would often cost us more games than they would win. And we would kick people out of our competitive team specifically because they just were unstable and they couldn't control their emotions. And we won a lot of money. We won, probably 50, 60 grand in my day of first person shooter stuff in America's Army. So anyways, very interesting on emotional development. This slide kind of wraps up this pillar. The subcortical limbic regions, those are the areas related to emotional expression, and they grow rapidly throughout this 12 to 18 range, and they outgrow the frontal cortex area, the dotted blue line, the cortical control regions. And when I wrap this up to a gaming company and I try to put a little bit of spin on it, I'm like, these are the people you're going to ban. These are the people that are going to do stupid stuff. These are the people who are going to be driving the 20 and 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds in your game absolutely nuts. So just prepare for it and have systems ready for it as well, because of this particular slide right here. And I'll tell them, like, look, the brain works as an inhibitory system. It's like, do I want to call someone that curse word because they just died? Most of us in this classroom would go, no, that's probably a bad thing and it's going to lead to friction. That's the dotted blue line that just said no. It's an inhibitory system. Whereas the average 14-year-old or 13-year-old is probably, and that's where, like, right in here where it's like the biggest gap. It's 13, 14, 15. Their no is going to get squashed by the pure enjoyment of calling someone a curse word in the middle of a game or raging on them. And so, anyways, we've got to prepare for it. I think some gaming companies have completely given up on this. What are your opinions on this, by the way?
I think there's been like attempts to try to help mitigate it, especially at least in like text communication in ways like blacklist words. But I think that's a very like band-aid solution to the overall problem, because at a point there's really not much they can do about it without completely reworking a lot of like their communication systems in games, or like voice chat and stuff like that, where there's near impossible to moderate the communication.
Yeah, and so we'll get asked this occasionally in UX, like what are some of the solutions that you can help us design or come up with, and we'll talk about what we will call the band-aid solutions that other games do, and we'll do our competitive research as well. I think the gaming companies that are really trying to take the like the lead on these efforts, they don't share their algorithms. I know League of Legends had a very outwardly push 5 years ago. They were really trying to shape this and come up with innovative ways of doing it. And then the last 2 years, it seems as though they've completely abandoned it. And the reasoning is it just costs too much capital, too much investment to do it. And it wasn't worth the return on investment. If you think about it, and this is a tricky one here, is like you can't ban this entire age range, even though they're going to cause most of the problems, because this represents a very significant amount of money, but also warm bodies to fill the servers, to keep the servers going, and the balancing systems going for the different rounds of combat, especially in competitive games. So any questions on this or Control before I shift gears into another one? Why don't we take a 7-minute break and start back up at 10:15. So, and the remaining slides are going to go relatively quickly. Probably got another half hour, maybe 40 minutes, but we'll definitely finish before quarter till the hour. So 7-minute break. We'll start back up at 10:15. All right. Let me know if you all are back.
Yep, I'm right here.
Yep.
I'm alive.
So I'll go and just keep going here. So just a few more slides to go through. Talk a little bit about depression and things of that nature. Typically, we just talk about this is related to the emotional issues a lot of these kids have, and so this is another reason why we tend to see a lot of that aggressive behavior, because there's just a lot of things going on in these kids' heads dealing with the social aspects of middle school and high school combined with the explosion, the growth of the emotion centers, and you tie into that the inability to inhibit certain emotions, and you get a lot of different issues that occur. And I specifically brought this slide in just to reinforce the issues with abnormal behavior in games. And obviously, if a kid is depressed and not doing well, oftentimes that can lead to aggressive behaviors or sort of poor interactions. We talked about the aggressive rejected child in the 6 to 12 range. This is typically, a little somewhat correlated with those children as they develop through the lifespan. So just another reason why we need to have certain elements present in our gaming company to help control. So let's talk about this pillar. This is a critical one. This is peer groups and membership in peer groups and how these kids group together. This is a big social component to what needs to be present in these games. So peer group membership is increasingly important. These dyadic friendships that you had in the previous range, the best friend relationships, become even more important to help balance out what's going on socially with the larger groups that you're now becoming more of a part of. And then kids tend to interact more so across what we call the classroom boundaries that were more prevalent in 6 to 12. We talked about previously that proximity was a big indicator of dyadic friendships in 6 to 12. So just having someone in your homeroom or having someone living next door produce these friendships. This is no longer the case, whereas friendships can reach out and go a little bit further in terms of distance. And it just happens that the brain develops and you can handle more complex distance type relationships and the complexity involved in that. But what is interesting is that games aren't designed for how these individuals socially interact. This is one of the things that most of the social systems teams of gaming companies look at the most, and we don't get to test this very often. I do have a company I'm working with right now that is interested in testing this, and they're going to do some ABC testing over the next 6 months. But essentially what we're looking at from 12 to 18 is you have those dyads that you had from 6 to 12, but you also have cliques. Cliques are small friendship groups that can hold some of your dyad relationships, but they're usually 5 to 10. The reason they're 5 to 10 is easy to communicate between 5 and 10. In other words, it's organization is not problematic. You don't necessarily need a leader with a group of 5 to 10. But as you go up in level, you get to the crowds. Those are the large groups that are recognized by a few predominant characteristics. And this would be like your band club, your band, your choir, your sports teams, your organizations, your student government. These are all the things that we join that are more about the identity that we're trying to attain and less about the friendships. So what's interesting is if I asked you, what is an example of crowds in gaming in terms of social systems, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Crowds in gaming as a social system. What would we call a crowd? We don't call them crowds.
The first thing that comes to mind are play styles almost. Like competitive versus more casual people versus like hobbyists, things like that. The people more competitive people who really want to win, who min-max everything, who want to be the best versus people who don't really care about stuff.
Tagging onto that, what would you form if you wanted?
The first thing that I think of in that situation is like clans.
Clans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would take what Alex says, and Jake, you're spot on. But clans usually form because of an identifying characteristic, right? You do get those more competitive clans, and you do get those more casual clans. But would we agree that most clan sizes can go up to 100? Some of them are limited at 50. I very rarely do I see a clan size, at least the limitations, any smaller than 50 in video games. What I don't see a lot of is any of the other social groupings that occur with 12 to 18-year-olds. I don't see any support for cliques at all. And cliques tend to be the most stable and long-lasting social groupings that 12 to 18-year-olds have. So in essence, like, people will switch crowds, but they tend to stay with their clique. The clique can dissolve as well, but they're just more stable than a crowd. So if you think about it, also, I talked about over-involvement of this age range, where they're involved in more than just one activity that might, be analogous to a clan in a video game. So they're part of, I don't know about you all, but I was football player, soccer player, student government, and like the science/gifted club. And I would also play Dungeons and Dragons, but that wasn't a crowd, that was a clique. So, and I typically would not have those, like, if I were going to go to a party on the weekend, they wouldn't all be at the same party. That'd be a disaster, right? I'd choose one of them to go to. Do any of you have a similar experience in high school with the multiple, you had some cliques, crowds? Go ahead, Alyssa.
Yeah. I did 2 sports throughout high school. I did soccer and cross country. I was also part of a lot of the not really student government, but I was in National Honor Society, Sertines, and a few others. I was even part of mock trial at one point. I also did robotics. I was in NJROTC at some point during, mostly during the end, but my little sister was involved in it, so I was kind of part of that group anyway. I was also doing a lot of the art. I was in the art club, and there were a few others that I can't remember, but I did a lot in high school.
Anybody else have a similar experience with a lot of different things you did?
I mean, it's so good.
No, I would say I did a bunch of different things, but I ended up I came to the realization that even though I did a lot of different things, it was always kind of with the same group of people and those same activities. So I'm not sure I had the same experience. I did cross country, drama club, business club, but it was always with the same. I found that the same people were interested in the same things as I did. So it was kind of like one clique moving around to different activities.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was gonna say. It's we all shared vast different interests, but we all had this but we were all friends, so we all still just did the same thing.
Yeah, and that's basically clique behavior versus crowd interactions. And I think, one of the things that was tough for me, Alyssa, is I had to leave friends behind because they weren't in certain activities. So I would have, my clique would be prevalent in 3 of those activities, but not in other activities within that environment. So one of the things I often talk to is about social instability in games. I'll talk to publishing and social teams about this. I'll say, one of the biggest drivers of people leaving game products is the inability to properly socially connect, or their social system starts to fall apart in the game. Their friends leave. Like if your clique leaves, Alex, in an MMO, 90% chance Alex is probably going to leave based off of the behaviors I know about Alex. So if I can allow people like Alex to better socially connect within a gaming environment and maybe even build another clique, that could possibly lead to better stability and keep a person like Alex in the game a little bit longer. Alyssa might be a little bit more stable in the game because she's had social practice and being involved in like different crowds. But one of the problems I have in games as well is typically you would only be a member of one clan. That's it, or one organization or one club. And that does not mimic real life whatsoever at all. So I don't know who came up with social systems for gaming worlds, but they're terrible and they have nothing to do with the real world. And when I talk to game companies about this, they get it. They're like, you're spot on. With 12 to 18-year-olds, our social systems are inadequate. We need to support dyads, we need to support cliques, and we need to support multiple crowds. And I see it in like a game like Clash of Clans, where there's a rule on the clans, like no one under 18 can join. And then of course they always let someone under 18 join, and then they leave and they jump around and they always say, hey, I'll be right back. And there's always some old guy in the clan, like 50, who just gets pissed off. And I don't know why he's getting mad, but he's like, yeah, I don't like clan hoppers. I'm like, he's not clan hopping. He's got friends in another clan he wants to go say hi to. And the way the social system works here is you can only do certain things if you're actually in the clan. So they're going to be back. And it's like, well, I don't like John. They got to show loyalty. And I'm like, look, no one shows loyalty to a bunch of strangers in a game, especially a 12 to 18-year-old. But what would have worked nicely is they put a social system in there so that the kids can communicate beyond just and work together beyond just, you know, what a clan allows in Supercell products. But see this in a lot of games, see a lot of MMOs. It's like certain things you can't do unless you're actually in the same group, right? In the same clan. So supporting cliques, supporting dyads, and, you know, Alyssa, what I would say is like, if a game company really wants to support social systems, look at what these people do socially in the real world and design a system that parallels it. And then you will give gamers true support of their social systems. No one has more complex social systems than 12 to 18-year-olds. They're all over the place. You will never have as many crowds as you did in high school for the rest of your life. It's really hard to have that much going on because you end up with work and school and all these things become more important. And you just have a limited amount of time to be involved. So one of the things I love discussing with game companies, and usually the social teams get it. And then, you know, one of the things that we always try to measure is retention. And it's very difficult to measure retention in a game without a proper social system present in that product. But I can predict retention based off of the type of social systems that are going to be present. And once again, I mean, the reason I have to know about all this stuff is because I have to measure it and predict. And if I can't predict based off of the measurement I'm doing, then a game company is usually like, well, what are we hiring you for? You know, your UX, you're supposed to be, you know, measuring the affinity of the users to our products and asking the right questions and telling us where there are deficits. And I can always tell them, like, guarantee your deficits are in your social systems. Social systems for you producers and programmers here, do you think they're designed early on in development, or are they the thing that they throw in at the end of development when they're getting close to launch?
I feel like end.
Yeah.
I mean, a chat system is almost always like one of the last things you ever you ever do.
Yeah, it is. And it's frustrating because it's so critical to how people game together is social systems. And anyway, some games are getting it. And some of my students have told me that, you know, Warframe has really got an amazing social system in it. But, and then so most games don't know. Just some science behind it. Membership in cliques is stable, always vulnerable to change. Reputational identity can be difficult to lose in a stable school population. That's a challenging one, right? Is that you have a finite number of kids. And so those kids are spread out amongst a finite number of crowds and cliques and dyads. And it's hard to lose that identity when there's only a limited number of individuals you can interact with. Membership in adolescent peer groups is a forerunner to membership in social groups. So this is actually going to impact us even more so when we get to the 18 to 24 range, where you go from membership to just experience different activities to membership for career purposes, which is what happens in college. We already know this. This is just something I throw in. Kids have a difficult relationship with their parents. More relationships with the extended family. Quality of home environment and relationships affect membership in peer groups. One of the things I often talk about is like, it'd be really great to design systems that allow you to play with your parents, but not for your people in the game to know you're actually playing with your parents. So you don't necessarily want your parents in your clan with you, but it would be cool to have them in like a little secret group with you, so that when you log in, it's very easy to like link up with them, see that they're online and do different activities, and then have them buy you stuff. And make them feel like you actually like them. So, and then in so forth but the social systems just aren't there to allow that to occur. I think games could be a really nice bridge to bringing kids and their parents closer together if we actually design for that a little bit in our video games. So, psychosocial crisis, group identity versus alienation. It's basically coming together and being a part of groups, but still keeping your individual identity. And it's that peer pressure that's really critical at this age range. You got all this stuff going on and you want to be accepted, but at the same time, you need to have some personal identity. And then of course, the group identity, there's 4 experiences that build group identity. Categorizing people and recognizing distinguishing features of group members. Experiencing a sense of history as a member of a group, emotional investment in the group, social evaluation of one's group and its relation to other groups. This is Clan Building 101. If your video game wants to have really strong crowds or clans or clubs or whatever we're calling it, these 4 elements need to be present. Most of them are lacking, like experiencing a sense of history as a member of a group. There's none of that in games. There's no picture, there's no ability to hang pictures of achievements or awards of past tournaments or raids or anything else like that in your sort of like clan castle or whatever else. Those things will drive stickiness of your membership in your group and provide stability. It's much like walking into a high school administrative office and you see like Alyssa, you see all the soccer trophies and the pictures of previous teams. You get a sense of history there that makes you want to belong even more to that program. You're like, oh, I'm in this because people before me were in this and they all developed this legacy. And this legacy is really important. So I think if games were to bring in a sense of history into their organizational structures, that would provide stickiness, another 10 to 15% of retention, which could be millions of dollars. The other ones they kind of do get at a little bit, but I don't know how much support game companies actually put into it to allow emotional investment into a group, like messages and things of that nature, and clan slogans or club slogans and things of that nature. Social evaluation, I don't see a lot of support for that in games either. It's like basically giving you data or allowing you to compare how your group compares to other groups. And that's basically like your rankings in your clubs and organizations in high school. It's like, how good was your chess club? What was your GPA of your student government, right? And, or how good was your science club? How many competitions did they win and things of that nature? It allows you to understand that there's a certain sense of history and power to your particular organization that's going to drive stickiness. Usually when I get on this slide, the social team members start going crazy, writing stuff down and coming up with all sorts of thoughts to create their games, make their games more sticky when it comes to social membership. Which is great because then that predicts retention and I can measure this stuff down the line. When I do UX on live groups or gamers who, I'm asking them, why are they playing when they don't actually like the game? And they'll say certain things like, oh, because I like the people I play with and I really want to stick with them and we have a sense of history and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, that's great. we have you continuing to play this game and spending money when you don't even like the product. That's wonderful. Alienation, that's something we want to steer away from. And that's obviously it's social estrangement. Yeah, the kids need a common identity. They need a common bond. This alienation is also going to be the same reason why a lot of kids are going to leave a video game. And it's essentially you lose your clan or you lose your large group and you need to integrate and find a more stable social group. I think the one clan system that a lot of games have and the way that you have to like completely leave a clan to go experience another clan is really catastrophic. And they should allow you to at least be a part of 2 clans so you can try another one out before you quit the first one. Sort of like dip your feet in the water. Because obviously leaving a clan can be incredibly catastrophic the way the systems are currently designed, because it shows that like you have no loyalty. And then you end up with those slogans in clans saying like, yeah, if no clan hoppers, or if you leave, you're not going to be invited back. Peer pressure, central process. This could be its own pillar. The demand for conformity to group norms and a demonstration of commitment and loyalty. That's a tough one when you're a part of multiple organizations. Like everybody wants your loyalty. It is often used with a negative connotation. Like if you don't do this, then you're a bad person. And that puts a lot of pressure on 12 to 18-year-olds. I try to tell my son, it's like, yeah, it's okay to be a part of a crowd. And yeah, sure, it's real sticky and this and that, but it's all about you. It's about development of the self, but you becoming a better person. And it's okay to change crowds. Like, don't feel like you have to stay. If it's not a right fit, you can explore. I mean, the kid's 11 years old and peer pressure's already hitting him where he's like, he'll do things that he doesn't like with people he doesn't enjoy because he feels like he has to belong to a group. So that's incredibly powerful. And it also is a tool that we can use as gaming companies to produce more stickiness to our product by having better social systems and better history and better this and that. It actually can produce more enjoyment. But pressuring someone into staying with just one clan because of the way we design the systems is a terrible thing to do. These kids are not going to do that. They want to be a part of 3, 4 clans and pursue their different interests. Basically, what Alex said, they're social, they're competitive, and they like to goof off. And they might have to join 3 different organizations to do those 3 things. So, fidelity to others. This is the balance that these kids are going through. The ability to freely pledge and sustain loyalties to others, to values and ideologies, these crowds, right? And dissociation is sort of the bad side of that. It's like a sense of separateness or withdrawal from others or inability to experience the bond of mutual commitment. So that actually makes it really problematic because the world is a social place. And as you move into the next age range of 18 to 24, we'll talk more about that, about having to be a part of social organizations, the workforce or college or social clubs. So there is a reason why we join clubs and organizations and work with others in this range. It's so we can understand how these systems work and understand how peer pressure works and balance out the self versus the group identities, all the stuff we talked about today. And then the last slide, the assignment. Make this legible for game companies that don't like to read, they don't like to listen, and they certainly won't sit through an hour and a half PowerPoint on it. You have to put it in plain speak. So this is, oh, sorry, there's a little bit of typo here. This is actually for ages 12 to 18. And it's the same assignment that we covered last time. Pick 4 pillars or areas or ideas of development and their impact on games. Explain the pillar. How does the pillar impact game design or UX? Really easy to do. And then how can we use the pillar in publishing, marketing, and BI? And then you just do 4 pillars or ideas or areas, and then you're done. And as I said, there's an example assignment up. It's really like a high B, low A example. It is for this age range, so please don't copy that verbatim. And then you can go from there. Any questions or clarification questions that might help with the assignment? or what I'm looking for. We already covered this previously. Yes, you can actually use the literature that's in the web course to help out with different areas. And you could actually go and get a peer-reviewed article and cover something that's not even talked about in lecture for 12 to 18-year-olds that actually impacts game design. That'd be really cool. No one's ever done that. I'd be excited if someone did that.
I have a couple questions.
Go ahead, Taylor.
So the first one is, are we following any specific formatting with these assignments, like double spaced or anything? Because I noticed you when you showed the
No
the assignment
formatting.
earlier, didn't have any. Okay.
Formatting doesn't exist in game company speak. It just it has to look organized and be easy to read.
Okay.
That's your formatting. When someone opens up the email and looks at your document, they can't be scared and go,
Gotcha.
"Oh, I don't want to read this. This looks confusing." So easy on the eyes is the request.
Okay. Cool.
It's
And
a
then
challenging thing to do, to make something that's more than 2 pages long that's going to be read by game company employees.
Yeah.
It's like designing catnip for cats. So
Yeah. MLA formatting.
no, don't do that to them. Yeah. This is an applied assignment, not a scholarly assignment.
Gotcha. So in the industry, they'd rather just see it as like easy to read.
Easy
Look
to
at it, they're
read,
done.
easy to follow with examples. Heck, if you could even put pictures in there, that would help out.
Gotcha. All right. And then
I'm-
oh
oh,
yeah,
sorry.
go ahead, you go ahead, Jeremy.
I was just gonna say I tried to do this last week, but maybe I'm just missing it. Where can I find the presentations
Oh,
if I want to re-reference? Yeah.
they're in the web course, and like when you go to the assignment, it's the attachments right below it.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question. Very good clarifying question, Jeremy, that will help many a student in the future. Is there any other good questions that will help future students? You all might live forever in this class. Think about that, Alyssa. Hundreds of students coming behind you, seeing this lecture and hearing our thoughts. There's something brilliant about that. Terrifying too, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm also gonna say this now.
Yeah, well, Robin said your class was the one to record the lectures with, so happy to do it. All right, I'm going to stop the share now, okay? And I'm going to stop recording.